All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you guys again so much for coming. Let's take care of some business first. Let's see. So as you guys logged in, make sure you have selected call with the computer. That will enable your sound. Then you'll want to make sure to, once you select that, it will highlight the green connect audio and video button. So make sure you click on that. You then can use that to check the volume on your computer to make sure I'm not too loud, not too soft. And then let's also click the chat box if you could for me. That's the bottom third from the right little button there. And when you do that, it should pop up with another little pull-down menu that says All Participants. So go ahead and select that so that way you can see as everybody chats what other people in the session are saying. And then if you could please mute any microphones that you may have on your computer, or if you're calling on your phone, just mute your phone for me. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So here's a little bit about me. My name is Linda Burrows, and I am the new K-12 Social Studies and World Language Specialist here at ADE. I started, in fact, just this past June after having taught public school for about 20 years. I taught all grades 7 through 12, actually, and I taught everything from co-taught classes to on-level courses to AP and dual enrollment classes. I have taught everything from U.S. history, world history, civics or government, economics, AP World, AP Human Geography, AP Macroeconomics. There's pretty much, I think the only things I didn't teach were Soc and Psych. So I also had the opportunity while I was teaching still to work on the standards committee that helped write the standards for the past couple of years. So I'm very, very familiar with it. And that picture is a picture of me and my family. My son just graduated high school, and he's a freshman at ASU at the Cronkite School of Journalism. And so that was his senior trip. We always do national parks. And my daughter is a junior at U of A, and she's majoring, in fact, she'll graduate this. She's a junior, but she's graduating this May with majors in Arabic, global studies, and Middle Eastern North African studies. So she had a ton of dual enrollment classes that enabled her to graduate early. And then that's my husband, and he teaches public high school for the Tempe Union High School District. So what I would like for you guys to do now is in the chat box, if you could for me, I'd like for you to introduce yourself, say what your current position is, where you teach, what you teach, and then rank on a scale from 1 to 4, just how well do you know the standards? 1 being you know them forwards and backwards. Maybe you've been working district to write your scopes and sequences already. 2, saying you're somewhat comfortable with them. 3, you know them a little. And 4, you haven't had a chance to look at them yet. So if you could take a minute to introduce yourself, I would appreciate that in the chat room, and we will go from there. All right, perfect. So it looks like most of you guys are at like a 3. We just kind of have a small crowd for today, so kind of an intimate webinar there. Most of you are 3 where you know them a little bit and are somewhat familiar with them. And then I think someone mentioned that they are somewhat comfortable with them, and then introduce some of you to them at all, or to get to know them. So hopefully you'll feel a little bit more comfortable as we go through today's plan. So let's see here. So what I'd like to do in today's agenda is, 1, examine the new standards because they look very different from the old ones. Specifically, I'd like you guys to understand maybe what some of the shifts in the new standards are and why they have changed. Inquiry is a big part of the new standards, so we'll want to review that and introduce you to it if you are unfamiliar with it. Then I'd like to show you guys kind of what the implementation timeline is. Like, what does the Department of Education expect from you guys as teachers or curriculum directors over the next year to 2 years as we implement these standards and get into full implementation of them. And then lastly, I'm all about giving you guys ready-to-use resources so that way you have things to go in your classrooms that you can start trying out with these new standards, and open it up to any questions or concerns that you guys may have or suggestions that we can have going forward. All right, so first to begin with, looking at the new standards, what are they? Because they do look very different from the old checklist of POs. So the new standards are based upon inquiry and questioning, and this comes a lot from the research-based models that we looked at prior to actually writing the standards. Both from the National Council for History Education and the National Council for Social Studies and the C3 framework, all really recommend this idea of inquiry and using inquiry rather than just being able to recite facts and events and things like that. That this idea of questioning leads to deeper understanding. The new standards are very broad. This can be both a blessing and a curse. One, it allows for flexibility, especially at a local level. We are a local control state. So from the State Department of Education, we cannot and will not ever tell you exactly how to teach, what specifically curriculum-wise you should be teaching, what books you should be reading. That should all be done at your local level, at your district or charter school. And that's great in that fact that it gives you that flexibility to really address the needs of your particular student. It can be a curse in the fact that there really isn't a lot of guidance, and so that does seem a little daunting and overwhelming to a lot of people as far as just how and where do we begin even with this process. But the nice thing with the standards too is you don't have to necessarily teach them kind of the old way that I grew up and a lot of people grew up teaching, where everything's chronological. It now is open for teaching U.S. history in a thematic way instead of doing it chronologically, or maybe you want to do it regionally if you're teaching world history. And so that's kind of nice to have that flexibility. And then this is something especially that you guys being secondary teachers in high school will really start to see in a few years, is that we actually show a progression of skills and topics, and that really should say from K-12, not 6-8. We are building now social studies standards that build upon each other both in skill level and complexity as kids go through kindergarten all the way up through into high school. Nice thing, especially if you're an econ teacher, they will be getting economics now and personal finance K8. They also, if you're a world teacher, they will now be getting world history both in 6th grade and in 7th grade. U.S. history is going to be tied more globally, but they will be getting some U.S. history both in 5th grade and in 7th grade. So we should really start to see some benefits of that as high school teachers. What the standards are not, they are not a checklist of items that students must memorize. The old POs were just kind of this list of items that, okay, I taught that person, I did that event, I did that movement, I'm good, I'm done, I don't need to revisit it. The standards are something that you will use and go over multiple times over and over again, and each time hopefully your students will be getting a deeper and deeper depth and understanding of the standards. And as such, they are not inflexible, they're not strict or rigid, and they're not standalone. The standards do work very well integrating in English, science, and other subjects like art. Obviously, like at a high school level, everybody's kind of compartmentalized, but that's not to say that when you're talking about, say, the scientific revolution or some kind of technological advances that you can't bring in some of the science and get with that. Or, for example, I was teaching economics this past year, and we were talking about, national economies and all of that kind of stuff, and the collapsing economies and, what that does nationally, and was talking with the Spanish teacher, and she was mentioning what was going on in Venezuela, and it was this great tie between my kids and her kids, as far as they could see what was going on in econ and then see what was happening in their Spanish class of all things. So that's what's great about them. So the new social studies standards are broad and they have many components to them, unlike the old ones. So first are the course considerations, and I asked you guys to print these out. If you weren't able to, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll kind of work our way through it. But they have course considerations. The course considerations are the topics, ideas, concepts that when you teach all of those, that makes a really robust and well-rounded world history, U.S. history, civics, and economics course. They also have disciplinary skills and processes standards, and that's your inquiry arc that comes a lot from the C3 framework. This is the part that's all about the questioning, compelling questions, and supporting questions in research. Then we have our content-specific standards, which are civics, economics, geography, and history. And what's key to note is that for every single course that gets created at a high school, you will have history, geography, economics, civics, and disciplinary skills and processes standards that you will be teaching. When you're teaching U.S. history and you teach about, even the foundations, and you're talking about Alexander Hamilton, and you're teaching some economic standards. When you talk about war and scarcity, you're teaching economic standards in a U.S. history course. When you're talking about trade in a world course, you're talking about economics. And when you're talking about governments and things like that, you're talking about civic standards. So you will have civics, economics, geography, and history standards, along with the disciplinary skills and processes standards that you will be addressing in all of your courses. So real quick, let's look just at the course considerations. If you have them printed out, look specifically at yours. I'm just going to very quickly kind of go through all of them. And so as you see here, this is the course considerations for civics. And you've got a bunch of bullet points here that look like a checklist, but it's really, really not. So for example, here at the beginning it says the foundations of government. And then it's got this long list of including but not limited to. The including but not limited to part are all just suggestions. Again, because we're a local control state, you don't have to think that that's the end all be all. I have to teach this, or that's kind of up to interpretations. But what you do have to teach is the main idea, which would be the foundations of government. Or in this case, the bullet point number 2 is structures of local, tribal, state governments, institutions of the national government, lawmaking process, media literacy, elections and voting behavior, citizenship, civil liberties and civil rights, American political culture and values and principles, public policy, and foreign policy. So those are like the main things that you have to teach. All this other stuff kind of back behind here, that's all the extra stuff. For economics, in this case, it didn't change that much from the old standards, with the exception of financial literacy and personal finance is kind of front and center, and that's especially important. I know we have an economics teacher here. That's especially important with the new personal finance law that the state just put out, requiring that financial literacy and personal finance be part of economics education. So that is there. Then you've got economic reasoning, economic systems, exchange and markets, national economy, and the global economy. Again, all this extra stuff here is all your choice and suggestions, but it's this main idea that's right behind the bullet that you have to teach. Geography, some places do actually offer geography standards. So that's if you would create like a separate geography class. Yes, you are. The course considerations would be the topics that you use to teach the standards. So, for example, let's look at, say, for course considerations, here's the U.S. course. So say if you're talking about the Civil War and Reconstruction, right, that's a topic. So you would use that idea of the Civil War and Reconstruction to then teach the history-specific content standards or the geography content standards and all of that stuff. So it does It seems like it's a lot, but I'm going to do an activity with you guys in a little bit that you will see how in so many of your lessons, you will actually be hitting, you know, anywhere between 5 to 12 standards just in one lesson. So for last year, I did a standard on, or I taught a lesson on the civil rights movement and economics of it. And I taught it as far as the Fair Housing Act. Was it really fair today? That was my compelling question. And in doing that, I added it all up and I hit 12 of the new standards just by doing one lesson on one day, looking at what the Fair Housing Act said, what it was supposed to do, and what the graphs and charts are telling us with the data today, that it really has been an ineffective policy. So um, topics for U.S. history, one thing to note is that you don't start in the colonial era. That's to avoid this idea of the old standards. One of the critiques was that they were a mile wide and an inch deep. And if we really want students to understand the world in which they live in today, as much as the colonial period is fun and can be interesting, it's not completely necessary to that purpose, and they will get that in elementary school and a little bit in middle school too. So high school should start at the Revolution, the founding of the new nation, nation building, Civil War reconstruction, the emergence of a modern America, the Depression and World War II, a post-war U.S., and then a contemporary U.S. And then lastly, for world, and this is probably the biggest change for world history, again, to address that problem of being a mile wide and an inch deep, is to start in the 15th century. So instead of starting with early man and the Neolithic Revolution and those river valley civilizations, you're going to start with trade, or whatever it may be. And it's nice because you can do this thematically, and you could do each one of these bullets, say, as a theme, going from the 15th century to the modern day. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you can't teach that old stuff before the 15th century. I kind of piloted this last year because I knew what the standards were coming. And so what I did was, for example, I would teach about, say, medieval China, and I was teaching medieval China, and that's when I introduced Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And what I did was I taught those belief systems and religions as an influence into what that society was, rather than going all the way back and teaching them, at 500 BCE when they started, kind of thing. And so your main ideas or main themes for world history would be the world belief systems, interregional interactions that you have, revolutions in thought, industrial revolution, political revolutions, the global rise of nation states, World War I, Holocaust and other genocides, the Cold War, global imperialism, and contemporary global issues. Again, trying to get to this idea that we're teaching kids to understand the world in which they live in. As much as I love the Mongols, and I think Genghis Khan is pretty fascinating, kids really don't need to understand who he was and what he did to get what world they're living in today. So real quick, I just want to do a little check and see what kind of concerns do you guys have with regards to the new course considerations. So if you could take a minute and type those into the chat box, I'd appreciate that, so that way we can discuss them as we go on here. So I know we'll definitely look at how you can address the course considerations and the individual standards. Let's see. For those of you that are in there, if you can make sure that you have in your chat box that you have all participants or all selected, so that way other people can see what you guys are typing, I'd appreciate that. So let's see, if you're teaching the course considerations, is it assumed that you will have taught all the standards? Basically, it's not that you're, in a way, yes, you're using those topics to then teach the standards. Someone asked about the publishing house. Since Arizona is not a huge state and we are such a local control state, I honestly do not see publishing houses changing textbooks to match Arizona text because every district can select their own textbooks. It's not like the state of Texas where everybody in the entire state of Texas has the exact same textbook. So if Texas says, oh, we want this in a book, it gets in a book. Arizona's not like that, so I don't foresee that happening. But that being said, I will say the good thing about the new standards is the textbook should be like your last resource and you really don't need it anymore. I kind of think of it as something that like, oh, you're going to have a sub, let's have something that doesn't have to, have a sub mess with technology. Let's do something in the textbook that way. And I'll explain that and give you guys lots of resources to supplement as opposed to using the textbooks. Let's see. The weight of the course. Definitely, I would say the idea of the weight of the course is a good one with regards to understanding the world in which we live in today. When you think about U.S. history, why is it a big deal that, you hear on the news that the president is, withdrawing troops from from Syria and what that means to the Kurds, and then how does that relate to what happened with Saddam Hussein and the Shia with the first Gulf War. So I think that's definitely an idea of what you would why you would want to address like the weight more heavy in the more modern 20th century kind of stuff. You're right. Textbooks still do have a lot of stuff of ancient history. You'll just ignore that part of the textbook and not have to use it. All right, let's go on so that way I can make sure that I give you guys lots of those resources to go through. So when we look at the standards, we have 21 anchor standards. So these are the overarching standards that kind of guide what we do in all of our classes, regardless of the subject matter. And these are the skills that we want students to master by the time they graduate high school. So they shouldn't have a mastered as a, sophomore in a world history class, but by the time they get to be a senior, yeah, they should be able to do these things. So we have 4 disciplinary skills and processes, 4 civics, 4 geography, and 4 history standards, because the study of history is no different whether you're studying U.S. or world. It's just a different topic. And we do have 5 economic standards, and that's because we wanted to make sure that personal finance is front and center. It's also number 1 because kids just really especially teaching economics, parents don't talk to kids about personal finance, and it's important to be financially literate. And it's important to understand economics and personal finance on a larger scale. That's why it's kind of the responsibility of every class at a high school level to teach some economics, but also at the K-8 level, they're getting economics from kindergartners talking about needs versus wants and comparative advantage and making decisions and choices all throughout their through their schooling. So like I said, each grade level has specific standards for the content area. High school, because it's up to the schools to determine what courses to create per the state board determining you have to have a civics, an econ, a US, and a world, they can pull all those into it. So what do you think might be the most notable feature of the new standards that you're seeing so far? Like what's striking you as maybe the most different, the most intriguing, most intimidating piece of these new standards? Type that in the chat box if you could for me. Yeah, the standards are definitely more open-ended than what they would. Inquiry is going to be fun. The nice thing, we'll be doing a lot of inquiry professional developments in the spring that are focused on that to give you guys more of the idea and more resources of how to use it, how to do like a full-fledged inquiry out of like the C3, or say like the DBQ project is one that some schools purchase, and then how to do just little pieces of that. So, all right, let's talk about some of the shifts. So some of the shifts, one, each grade band, first of all, is inquiry-based to focus on that learning and critical thinking. There's also a big progression from the individual at an elementary level to kind of a community, to a state, to the U.S., to the world, even by the time they get to 8th grade. And then the same goes for high school, again, to kind of expand that viewpoint of students. We do have anchor standards that are written that support grade level. And then the skill complexity increases from grade to grade. So yes, 4th graders are being asked to analyze things, but obviously that's going to be at a much different level than, say, a junior in high school would be analyzing items. U.S., a big change at the high school level is that this idea that the U.S. and the world standards aren't different. It's just one, they're just history standards. That was really weird for me to get a hold of because I'd always think of them as separate courses, but they're actually, the study of history is the same. As an econ teacher, I love the fact that econ is now a focus in K-12 now, instead of just me having to do it. These don't necessarily pertain to you guys, but just so you know, to kind of do that progression, Arizona Studies moved from 4th to 3rd grade, colonial content moved from 5th to 4th grade, and that's it. All right, so what I'd like for you guys to do, and this will hopefully address some of the concerns with the course considerations versus the standards and how do they all kind of fit together. You guys printed out, or you should have your standards for the course considerations for the course that you teach. And then you should have the standards underneath it, and these should all have like an HS.SP1.2 or HS.H3. I think I said the page numbers to print out. And what I'd like for you to do is select one bullet from the course consideration, so just one topic that you're going to teach. So say if you're teaching civics, maybe you're going to talk about the foundation of government, right? And so if that's your topic, then go through all of the HS.SPs, HS.H, HS.G, HS.8C, and see what of those topics then would apply to that particular bullet. So let me show you an example here of 7th grade. So if I have the bullet is revolutions, so in this case, this is their course considerations of 7th grade, right? They have to teach revolutions. So it could be any of these they get to pick, right? So this idea of revolution, and then going through, and if you're teaching just a unit on political revolutions, you've got all these compelling, disciplinary skills and processes that work for it. You have civic standards like explaining how revolutions, comparing historical and contemporary means of change in society. These would all apply here. Economic decisions affect well-beings and societies. Current economic issues would impact society, what that benefit or cost of a revolution would be. Here are some geography standards, and these aren't even all the standards. So if I were teaching a unit, say on 7th grade, I could apply all of these different standards to just one unit. Now, that's not to say you would do all of them because you're going to want to focus, but what I'd like for you to do now is just take 5 minutes and pick a bullet on your course consideration, and then go through where you see the standards listed kind of like this and see how many of them you can apply, and type that number into the chat box for me. If you did not weren't able to get the standards printed ahead of time, I can show you, and you can on your computers go out to this website here. Let me show you here. So here's the K-12 standards website, and it's just, if you type in Arizona State Social Studies Standards, it'll pop up with this page. You can click on this download complete standards document, and that will bring up a PDF of the standards. And so you click on that, and this has the standards in it. You would have to come all the way down to, I think it's page, let's see here, course considerations. So I was talking civics. So maybe you pick foundations of government, that's bullet number 1. And then, so if that's your topic, then come down here where you start to see these standards and pick how many of those, when you're teaching about the foundations of government, how many of these would apply, how many of the civics would apply, how many economics might apply, and just kind of go through and just kind of count up real quick how many of those would apply to that one particular bullet point of the foundations. So take a minute. I'll give you guys like 5 minutes here, and then we'll kind of confer after that. Okay, just about a minute more to kind of finish up, just counting like how many ones you could possibly apply. 17, fantastic. Awesome, 30. Training exchanges, sectionalism, 17. Yeah, that's great. 30 or so, perfect. So you guys are starting to see kind of a pattern here. So while there does seem when you first look at these, when you add the course considerations and all these standards, like, oh my God, you know, there's so many that I have to teach. But the thing about the standards is that they are standards, right? These are the goals that we want the kids to get to at the end. So it's not like the old standards where we would just do the one and done kind of thing. You're going to hit a standard like, analyze the relationship between supply and demand over and over again in a world history class as you talk about trade at all these different time periods, right? And depending upon what you're going to do, you're going to hit these multiple times. So here, this is a quick video that I'm going to show you guys, and we're just going to watch like 5 minutes of it. Whoops. Were you guys able to hear that just now? The music playing? Okay, that's what I thought, because it's in there. Let me pull it up this way. Let's see here. Now you guys should be able to hear. Yes, perfect. So while this is talking about having to integrate uh, social studies and ELA, it does show you kind of the idea of what inquiry is. Let's see. Some of you guys can't see this. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yep, cancel that. Let's see here. Let's try this again. Let's see. No video or audio. I can hear me, but not the video. Let's see if this video works now. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're not going to watch too much more. And yes, I will send out this link. So this is from the Georgia Department of Education. But I like this, even though it's elementary or, middle school kind of thing. One, they're doing a history, world history topic. But you can see here how they're not using textbooks at all. They are using documents and images and different things like that that you can use with guided questions. A lot of the stuff I will show you guys as far as resource goes all come with that are already scaffolded for like on level or low level kids. And so it's very similar to Kagan of the Think, Pair, Share, but it's this idea that you're not using a textbook and you're using documents or images to kind of get kids to look at that. So let me, get back to the PowerPoint. All right. Okay, so with inquiry, inquiry has, let's see, I have to, pull up my chat screen again. There we go. So inquiry has kind of this circular idea that you're exploring the standards, using those topics in the course considerations. You develop the questions that leads to the gathering of resources and research, which then leads to more questions that you eventually communicate conclusions with. And the communicate conclusions can be formal written essays, which you see a lot, like if your school has the DBQ project, or a lot of the C3 project does have a lot of writing in it, but it doesn't have to be just written kind of work. It can be some kind of presentation, it can be some kind of visual, it can be some kind of Venn diagram even, or graphic organizer. And so it's this idea that like kind of really Socratic thinking gets you involved, and then will ultimately get these kids involved in the world in which they live in, which gets them more involved in civic life. So as we go forward with our kind of implementation timeline, so last year, 2018-2019, was kind of words. It was an awareness of the change in disciplinary skills and processes into lessons. For this year, the 2019-2020 school year, we want teachers to continue to incorporate disciplinary skills and processes and inquiry into their lessons as much as possible. Like I said, we will be having a lot of PD. That's our focus for the spring, is on inquiry PD. Also to gather those resources and creating lessons that use the new standards, and then attend professional development to learn about inquiry and content. Ideally, full implementation would be starting in the year 2020-2022. We want you guys to continue to engage in professional development and evaluating lessons and gathering resources. Obviously, especially for some schools where maybe you don't have a large district that kind of is supporting you in the preparation of scopes and sequence and that kind of stuff, it may take you a little bit after 2020, may take you 2021 to 2022 to be fully implemented, and we understand that. So there is no social studies test on the horizon, so there's no need to fret about that. So that kind of leaves us with a little bit more flexibility that way. So as you guys are looking up for resources, definitely remember that variety is kind of the spice of life. Resources don't have to be just documents to annotate. It can be maps, it can be artifacts, it can be photographs, it can be tapestries, it can be actual architecture, besides just your traditional letters and diaries and things of that nature. So talking about resources, after I do attendance tomorrow, I will send you guys a PDF of this PowerPoint for you. And each one of these here is hot linked, and that these are some of the best ones, but I've also got a bunch of other ones out there to show you guys where they go. So you can click on this and it will bring you up like here. Let's see here if my computer's being a little slow. It should bring up the C3 inquiry. And here we go. There we go. So here's like, for example, what the C3 inquiry is. I definitely would say don't select by grade or hub, select by topic here. So for example, if you want to go U.S. government, again, some of the topics, even though it may say it's an 8th grade one, it may work really well for high school, or, especially if you have, say, like a low-level class or a co-taught class. Some of my co-taught classes, I had one last year that I had 14 out of 32 kids were, SPED kids, and of those 14, I had 3 that had like a 3rd to 4th grade reading level. So I used a lot of 8th grade stuff to kind of help do things. But you can scroll through here and let's see, civics test. Here's one on the Constitution. So you just click on this and it will take you to a PDF. It will ask you to join. I have never had any problem joining, but just to show you kind of what this looks like here. Did the Constitution establish a just government? This would be your compelling question. And then these are supporting questions here. Yes, and the nice thing is you can download this as a PDF and as a Word document, so you can manipulate it for whatever you want to do. The nice thing about these will take like a few days. Don't feel like you have to do all of it. You can do just this one part here where it says, oh, did the framers, feel that a new document was necessary? So you're doing a list of concerns. Here it's got the documents. Here actually the excerpts for you already. And you can just kind of scroll down. Let's see, summative tasks. So here's your supporting question. Here's your source right here that it's got. You can even go into it and edit it even further if you would like. For example, last year I did one on the Korean War. Was the Korean War forgotten? Why was the Korean War forgotten? And I only had time to do one little piece of it. So I just did, I think it was supporting question number 2 on that. Another good one, definitely the Federal Reserve is one of my favorite ones. Econ EdLink. Teaching Tolerance has got some great lessons for hard to teach history when you're talking about, slavery and civil rights and things like that. ReadWorks and Newsela are more current events ones, which are great, and they also have Lexile adaptations where you can do that. And then I want to show you guys our website, because one thing I never thought of when I was teaching was the fact that ADE might have resources that they have available for us to use. And that's one thing that Tammy and I have been really trying to work hard, is to get more and more resources to you. So let me just point out a few things on our website. One, you can sign up for the newsletter here. And all of this is hot linked in the PDF that you'll get tomorrow. Sign up for the newsletter, and I give you that information once a month, like at the beginning of the month. We also have recorded webinars, so today's webinar will eventually go right here. I also have created new social studies videos. These are roughly 10-minute videos on the standards overview. I did world history ones because they were the ones with the most change in high school. However, I will say, with the exception of the balanced focus, this 10-minute video on inquiry, the standards, and how to create a scope and sequence would apply to any high school course. So those are there. We also have, if you want, there's an ELP, so the English Language Learner Social Studies ELA crosswalks that we've created, and let's see, you can come here. Our implementation resources like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade definitely have stuff for high school. But if you click up here on Resources tab and then come down here for Social Studies Resources, I have gone out and created a list of resources here. So here are your course considerations with all your topics. And then I have all of these links here that go to, say, the history, and then it says what it is over here. So you can click on, PBS Learning Media, and it will take you out there. Everything out there has been vetted. They're great resources. If you want to look like here at economics ones, I felt like, and you could see, I just we've got tons of stuff that I've kind of gone through over the last few months, tried to cull together some great resources because you don't need textbooks anymore. And like I don't remember who pointed out earlier that some of the textbooks still have like half the textbook is on stuff we don't have to teach anymore. Now here you've got plenty of resources here. Here's U.S. history, all sorts of stuff that, the Foreign Policy Institute, and there's all sorts of new stuff here. If you teach world history, there are some new, these are great, like the Indian Ocean resource, Asia for Educators, Teach the Middle East, for some different ones that are tied to it. And all of these are hot linked. They are all free. Sometimes some of them need you to create a user account, but other than that, it's totally easy to do. So that is there again. Whoops, that's under the resources tab. And then last thing I wanted to show you guys was our professional development too, that you guys know about us. You signed up for the webinar, but we do have a lot of other things. So when you get this PD, you can use this QR code by taking a picture with it with your phone, or it's also, I just hot linked it here from this PDF. And we have a lot of partner groups that do PD for us that we don't necessarily do, and we don't have it in the ADE web content because it's partner organizations. So what I've done is created this training list where you can come out here, and this has got all of our fall PD, and I'm constantly updating it and adding new things to it. So here's like the webinars. We just had a couple trainings in person at ADE. I need to update those. But say, for example, we have Civic Saturday. So if you teach civics, you can come here on a Saturday. You get a $50 Barnes & Noble card. Everything is hot linked, so it takes you right out to the registration page. And in this case, this one is through EMS here. So that way you can just click down here and see, I don't know why, it's my computer screen is smaller, so it's not letting me show you how you can register for it, that one. So Civic Saturday would be a great secondary one. We have Big History coming for high school, which is, they've got tons of great free resources. And we also have Documents and Debates is next week if you can get the day off that's for like your own personal kind of edification. We have some other stuff. There's a conference here for teens on the Holocaust. There's one in February that I'll be adding for teachers. Here's a geonomics one on water and weather through ASGA. This is one I wanted to point out to you guys. We're hosting it here, but it's actually through the Korean consulate, where we have the Cold War and its impact on the Korean conflict and on U.S. / Republic of Korea relations today. And so we have two professors coming from California to talk about the Cold War and the Korean conflict in the morning. And then the afternoon is all lesson planning, resource inquiry, and we're hosting that here at ADE. So that would be a great one if you are lacking in your information about the Korean War or Cold War. So if you teach U.S. history, world history, it would be great. Even I think like civics or econ, you could use that information too. There's another Documents and Debates here. FinCamp, these are great for econ. I went to one last year. Here's another one like Empowering Students. And so you just click on these and it's got your, how to register for it and all the information here for you. So that is something to look for. We're going to keep this all out so that way you have a place to go to find resources for ADE that we can have for you guys. All right. Last, I just wanted to open it up to any questions because we've got about 5 minutes that you guys may have. I know this was really quick. We will be having a lot of resources in the spring on inquiry and actually using the standards, but this was just kind of a little snack overview of the standards. So any questions that you guys have, I'd be happy to answer them for you. If not, you are welcome to go. I will take attendance tomorrow, and you will get this PDF for it that has all the links to it. Once you are recorded as having attendance, you can go into your ADE Connect page, and that's where you click under completed, and you can print off your certificate for attending this webinar as well, and that way you guys can get some professional development credit for it too. And I think that is about all. So thank you guys all so much for coming. I appreciate your time. I know it's very valuable. And enjoy the rest of your evening. And please feel free, you all have my contact. Please feel free to email me if you're like, oh my God, I'm not sure how this is going to work, or I'm not sure how prepared we are. Just let me know so that way I can help you, give you some templates for scopes and sequences, or help you with resources if you're looking for a particular topic that you don't have a lot for right now, but you're kind of, you know that that's where there's a gap in your resources that you need more. Let me know so that way I can point you in the right direction. So thank you so very much. I appreciate it. And good night. Have a good night.